I felt humiliated when they branded me a delinquent over $250. The HOA wanted power, so I bought the alley and turned their office into a cage. Their lien was cheap, my revenge was priceless, and that wasn't even the worst part. The sun was barely over the hills when I stepped out onto the porch, coffee steaming in one hand, the familiar rattle of the wind chime marking another calm morning. The lake shimmered in the distance, neighbors already rolling grills onto driveways for the weekend barbecue. It was the kind of morning that lulled you into believing nothing could disturb the rhythm of retirement. The metallic clank of the mailbox lid broke that illusion. A certified envelope sat inside, heavy with official ink and the red stamp of the county clerk. I felt the paper's stiffness as I pulled it free thumb, running over the embossed seal. Elise appeared behind me, her robe pulled tight. "Another flyer?" she asked. I tore the envelope open. The words hit me harder than the dry spring wind. Notice of intent to lien. $250, a landscaping violation. The letters were bold black and final. My grip tightened until the edges cut into my palm. Elise laid a calming hand on my wrist. "Let me see." She read it quickly, lips pressed thin. $250. Across the street, Morales was wheeling his trash bin to the curb. He glanced over, curious, then looked away as if he'd intruded on something private. I stood frozen in the driveway, letter flapping in the breeze like a flag of surrender. The notice cited a failure to maintain front lawn harmony, whatever that meant. I thought of the trimmed grass, the neat edges Elise had fussed over last week. No detail was out of place, not by my eye. Yet, here it was, a threat with teeth pay or face a lien. Inside, Elise set the letter on the kitchen table, the smell of mesquite smoke drifting through the open window from Morales's grill. She opened the binder she kept for household papers, dividers neatly labeled taxes, insurance, HOA. The new letter slipped into a fresh sleeve with a sharp snap. "We'll need every scrap of paper," she murmured. I tried to brush it off. "It's just a mistake. A warning." But my voice lacked conviction. By afternoon, the real blow came. My phone buzzed with a new email, subject failure to comply. CC'd to the entire HOA board. My name now floated in every inbox on the street. The message was clinical cold, dripping with bureaucratic authority. I stepped back out onto the porch, reading the words again. The compass wind chime swung wildly in the gust, its north point needle jittering as though it too was unsettled. The metallic clink echoed against the siding louder than usual, like a clock striking the hour. Our quiet retirement had been cracked open. I wrote my reply with care, citing dates and the photo Elise had taken of the lawn's clean edge. The email was precise, polite. Within minutes, Lori hit reply all. "Your non-compliance endangers community harmony." My name and accusation now floated through every inbox in the subdivision. Elise sighed and pulled a folder labeled HOA. 2018 from the cabinet. "Print it," she said. Emails vanish. Paper stays. Outside, Morales leaned over his fence. "I've got something," he whispered. My doorbell camera caught the inspection. "They never stepped on your grass." He pressed a small USB into my hand later that night, his kitchen smelling of tortillas and cumin. The following evening, I sat in the HOA's strip mall office. Fluorescent lights buzzed, plastic chairs scraped. Lori, in her gray blazer, handed out a newsletter titled Lakeview Harmony. A column read, "Some residents continue to ignore simple guidelines burdening their neighbors." No names, but eyes shifted toward me. I folded the paper, slid it into our binder, and raised my voice. "I request the photos and dates for my violation." "We don't discuss individual cases," Lori replied smoothly. "But harmony standards apply to everyone." Elise whispered, "Save your breath. We'll use the letter." Back home, I opened the USB. The video showed two inspectors stepping from a white sedan, snapping pictures from the sidewalk, then leaving. The lawn was immaculate, timestamp clear. Elise pressed print, the inkjet humming as the still frame emerged. She slid it into a sleeve and snapped the binder shut. "They'll wish they hadn't documented this," I said. Lisa's hand settled on my shoulder, steady as a promise. "This is only the beginning." On the porch, the compass chime hung motionless, its needle trembling at nothing, as if it knew which way the wind would turn. Grady Holloway found me by the waterline where the cedar roots gripped the limestone like old hands. He wore a sun-bleached cap and moved with the caution of a man who spent a lifetime measuring what other people only guess at. His tape snapped in the light, a quick metallic zzzt, then settled as he sighted along it toward my back fence. "You called her?" he asked, not looking up. "I am." He nodded, once slid the tape back into its case. "Name's Grady. Morales said you were having neighborly troubles with folks who don't mow your grass but claim to know it better than you. I laughed more than the line deserved. Something like that. We walked back up to the yard where Elise had set a folding table beneath the live oak. The binder lay open like a small animal that had learned to play dead-thick indexed bristling with sticky notes. Cicadas sawed the heat into finer heat. Grady flipped through the binder with carpenter's hands surprisingly gentle. Covenants, conditions, and restrictions, he said, as if reading the title of a worn-out hymn. People think this is scripture. It's not. It's a contract layered over your deed, and contracts have doors even when they call them walls. He pulled a capped pen from behind his ear and uncapped it with his teeth. Section on records inspection, he said, tapping the page. That's your right to see the basis of any action taken against you. Dates, photos, bills. You don't ask. They won't offer. You ask properly. They've got a clock ticking. He highlighted 2 lines in yellow slow, and even like painting a narrow road. Elise slid closer with a legal pad writing as he spoke. Her handwriting, neat enough to measure with a ruler, broke a little at the corners from the summer humidity. And here. He turned to another dog-eared section. Do, process. Before they put teeth in anything. Hearing fines, Lien, they owe you notice that specific a chance to answer and somebody not named Lori pretending to be neutral. He glanced up, then the corner of his mouth lifting. I have met 100 Loris. They're all different people and exactly the same. A breeze pressed through the porch screen. The compass chime knocked once like a knuckle on wood. Grady reached into his canvas bag and pulled out a narrow memo pad. He printed in block letters as if plotting a center line. 1. Demand, records, photos, inspection logs, expense sheets. 2. Escrow dues with conditions funds release on compliance with records, plus fair hearing. 3. Request hearing paper trail witnesses if possible. 4. Consider easements, access affecting them more than you. He slid the pad to me. I expected instructions to taste dry. Instead, they felt like water. Elise filed the page into a sleeve, then tucked the sleeve behind a tab labeled Action. What do you mean by easements? I asked. Grady thumbed sweat from his brow. Sometimes the path is hidden behind the alley, he said, almost to himself. Old plats around here have weird little strips, access lanes, service alleys, leftovers from when the county thought straight lines were cheaper than curves. People forget them until a fence gate won't open or a truck can't turn. He knelt by the corner stake and tapped it with the pen. You don't fight small power with big noise. You fight it with a line drawn where they didn't bother to look. He stood slowly, bones complaining. You said their office is in that strip mall off FM 306. Between the nail salon and Cash for Gold, I said. Grady nodded like a man checking off a punch list. There's a service lane behind those units. Sometimes the lane is platted separate, owned by nobody anyone remembers until the tax office does. Worth keeping an eye on. He didn't push it further, and I didn't ask because the thought itself felt like a door I could leave cracked while we worked on the one in front of us. He went back to the binder. Write your records request tonight. Use dates, times, inspection references. Ask for the newsletter source file too, who wrote it, who approved it. If they refuse you, log the refusal. Everything is either a document or a delay. Both say something. Elise underlined document or delay and boxed it. She already had plastic sleeves laid out empty and expectant like parking spaces that would soon fill. We took a break at the kitchen counter. I poured lemonade into glasses that sweat onto the cork coasters we'd bought at the craft fair where the mayor had cut a ribbon for a new fishing pier. The memory helped. Small ceremonies have a way of stitching a place to you. The big ones tear, the small ones mend. When we went back outside, Grady asked to see the newsletter. I handed it over. He held it up to the light. No byline, he said. That's a tell. People who are right sign their names. He boxed and dated the printed email in blue pen, then laid it beside the newsletter as if the two ought to learn to get along. Send your letter certified, he said. And don't be clever. Clever reads as angry. Write like a man who will be here longer than the board. Somewhere around then, a small laugh came up from my chest without my permission. Elise looked at me, eyebrows raised as if to ask whether I was finally hearing what she'd been telling me quietly for months. They won't expect me to read the fine print, I said. That's the trick, Grady replied. Most folks don't read what they sign. The rest don't remember what they read. You're going to do both. He flipped the binder to the front and slid in a new sheet he'd printed once upon a time for someone else like me, hearing prep checklist. Witnesses, exhibits, questions written before the room gets hot and the words get stuck. He had me initial each line when I understood it more shop class than civics. The light shifted. The shadow of the oak traveled across the table tabs like a second hand. A cicada shell clung to the fence, the living insect gone on to its next version of itself. We wrapped near sunset. Grady clicked the tape measure back in with a sound like a latch, then looked past my shoulder toward the porch. The wind had picked up a little. The compass chime spun slowly, its north point aligning and holding. "You got good bones here," he said, meaning the house and something inside me I wasn't used to anybody pointing at. "Keep your notes like a survey. If anybody moves a stake, you'll know it." He put on his cap again, 2 fingers to the brim, and started down the gravel path as if the distance to his truck had already been counted. At the gate, he paused. "One more thing," he said without turning. "When they tell you harmony, they mean quiet. You can be quiet without being still." After he left, Elise and I sat at the table, the binder between us, the yellow highlights bright even in the dim. I addressed an envelope to the association and wrote records request on the subject line of the letter inside. My hand didn't shake. Halfway through sealing it, Elise's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced down. The screen lit the underside of her jaw. She read the subject aloud, her voice flat to keep it from trembling. "Escalation notice. Legal action pending." The cicadas seemed to pause together as if even they knew to let the words settle before the buzzing started up again. The smell of brisket reached us before the pavilion came into view. Cars lined the gravel shoulder, neighbors carrying foil pans and coolers, children darting between legs. Elise and I walked up the path with our potato salad, but conversation slowed as we passed, voices fading like radios turned down in sequence. Inside, folding tables sagged with food condensation running down plastic cups. A banner reading Lakeview HOA. Together in harmony drooped from thumbtacks. I felt eyes skim across me, retreating quickly, polite in their distance. Lori took the stage, in a sundress newsletter in hand. "I'm thrilled to see our community gather," she began. Smile tight. "But we must remember, repeat violators burden their neighbors." Her eyes drifted over the crowd, landing briefly long enough on me. I felt Elise's touch at my elbow, grounding me. She murmured, "Don't bite." I nodded, though heat climbed the back of my neck. Copies of the Lakeview Harmony newsletter shuffled down the rows. Elise passed one to me. The second column read, "Some residents continue to disregard simple standards. The board will act without favoritism." Vague words, but every glance in the pavilion pointed them straight at me. We made our plates and found a patch of shade. Most tables had filled, ours stayed empty. I caught Ruth Ann Baylor's small wave from across the pavilion, gentle, apologetic. It was the only kindness offered. When Lori stepped down, she moved from group to group, laughing too loudly. At our table, she paused, eyes on my plate. "Glad you could make it," she said. Elise answered smoothly, "Good to see you too." That was enough. Lori moved on. We walked home as dusk settled. Children drew chalk grids on driveways. Sprinklers hissed. Elise carried the empty bowl, shoulders squared. I tried to think of something ordinary to say, and failed. As our porch came into view, silence struck. The compass chime was missing its familiar rattle. Then the wind shifted and it tore free from its hook, crashing to the boards with a metallic clang that echoed too loudly. One arm bent sharply. The leather cord split at the knot. Across the street, the Caffreys stopped mid-step, their foil-wrapped plates held like shields. They looked, then looked away, unwilling to linger in my humiliation. I knelt, gathering the broken pieces, the bent arm resisting my grip. My hands shook as I laid the chime on the counter, inside its needle pointing nowhere. Elise crouched beside me. "We can fix it," she said softly, meaning more than the chime. When I turned back to fetch the bowl, I saw the envelope on the mat. White, stiff, certified band in red. Notice of intent to lien. Immediate action required. The hook above us clicked against the siding in the wind, marking time in the quiet. I lifted the letter but didn't open it. Elise stood behind me, silent. Across the street, porch lights blinked on early. Our retirement had shifted again, and the sound of it was thin wood closing behind me. The mediation center sat in a strip mall off the highway, wedged between a title office and a tanning salon. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, making everything look harsher than it needed to be. Elise and I carried our binder like it was another person between us. I could feel the eyes of neighbors as we walked in, some curious, some already convinced. Plastic chairs scraped the linoleum. Lori sat at the far end of the table, blazer stiff, smile tight. She had a manila folder in front of her, but no nerves in her hands. Beside her sat Pam, the treasurer, eyes darting toward the door as though she'd rather be anywhere else. The mediator cleared his throat, then read the opening line. We are here to discuss the matter of a lien placed on Mr. Wynn's property. He adjusted his glasses and gestured toward me. Mr. Wynn, you may begin. I slid a copy of the lien across the table. The red county stamp bled against the white. This is the basis of your claim, I said. $250. Landscaping violation. My voice didn't shake. Here is the newsletter you circulated calling me a repeat violator without evidence. Another sleeve slid forward. Lori kept her smile. Community harmony is at stake. We enforce equally. Then, show the record. I opened the binder to the page with Morales' camera still's timestamp visible. On the day cited, my lawn was in full compliance. The footage proves it. Whispers drifted from the back row. Someone shifted in a chair. Elise handed around printed copies. The room grew heavier as the papers passed from hand to hand. Pam spoke, suddenly, voice thin. We never had photos for that notice. She looked at her lap. The president said it was necessary. Lori snapped her head toward her. Pam. But Pam pressed on, pulling a sheet from her folder. And this, she said, sliding it forward, shows the board approved payments to a consulting company tied to your cousin, out of HOA funds. The mediator frowned. The air conditioning kicked on but couldn't cool the room fast enough. I drew a breath. There's one more matter. From the bottom of the binder, I lifted a new deed. The county seal shimmered under the lights. Last week, I purchased the service alley behind this very office at a tax sale. It is now Wynn property. Access is by permission only. For the first time, Lori's face lost color. You can't, the mediator cut in. Deed is valid. Yes, I said, placing the certified copy on the table. Elisa's hand steadied mine as I did. Gasps broke from the neighbors seated in the back. Ruth Ann leaned forward, eyes wide, as though a script had flipped mid-scene. I let the silence stretch. Then I said quietly enough to make them lean closer. If you corner me over $250, I'll own the ground beneath your feet. Pam covered her mouth. The mediator adjusted his glasses again, visibly rattled. Given the evidence presented, video-proof financial irregularities, and the lien's lack of record, I rule the lien void. The board will be subject to audit. Effective immediately, President Lori Kettering is censured. Elise reached for my hand under the table. Lori's jaw tightened. She forced a laugh that fooled no one. This is ridiculous. You're letting him grandstand. But the neighbors were already murmuring. Phones lifted screens glowing. For once, not at me, but at her. The mediator closed his folder. Meeting adjourned. We stood binder heavy but vindicated. Elisa's phone buzzed. She glanced down, then whispered, "They're calling a special session tonight. Lori won't let this go quietly." I looked at the deed again, my name in bold letters. For the first time since the notice arrived, I felt the balance shift. Outside, the summer heat hit like a wall, but it couldn't smother the relief that threaded through my chest. Still, I knew the fight wasn't over. Folding chairs scraped the linoleum like complaints trying to stand up. The mediation room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and copier toner, the kind of institutional blend that turns nerves into paperwork. Elise and I set our binder on the table. It thudded with a dignity I hadn't felt in months. The spine bulged a little, an extra sleeve tucked deep in the back where my hand had checked its presence twice on the drive over. Fluorescence hummed. A wall clock ticked in exaggerated seconds. Ruth Ann sat behind us, purse on her lap, like armor. Morales leaned forward 2 rows back. Elbows on his knees, eyes steady. At the far end of the table, Lori arranged her blazer collar without touching it, smile set to medium. Pam Sloan, the treasurer, kept smoothing the edge of a manila folder as if the paper might ripple back into the past if she pressed hard enough. The mediator, a compact man with a courthouse haircut, cleared his throat and read the case caption from a printed sheet. We are convened to consider the Homeowner Association's lien against Mr. Calder Wynn. His eyes traveled from his notes to me. Mr. Wynn, you may proceed. I opened the binder to Exhibits, Communications. The plastic sleeve crinkled as I slid out copies. First, the notice of intent to lien $250 for a landscaping violation. The red county stamp glared back from the page. Second, the HOA newsletter publicly implying I am a repeat violator. I placed the printout with the headline, Ongoing Compliance Concerns, beneath the notice. Third, the reply all email from the HOA president. Your non-compliance endangers community harmony. The mediator glanced at the subject lines and nodded, pen poised. He smelled like the coffee. Do you have evidence pertaining to the condition of the property? I turned the tab to Exhibits, Video/Photos. Morales' doorbell camera time-stamped the day cited. I handed copies of the still frame down the line and set an envelope with a USB drive beside the mediator's pad. Note the edged lawn compliance clear from the curb. Chairs shifted behind me. Paper moved hand to hand with the low rustle of doubt reconsidering itself. Elise distributed copies like a practiced clerk, each page aligned square to the table edge. In the back, someone exhaled in a small, involuntary, "Oh." Lori kept smiling. A single video angle can't capture all. "Do you have inspection photos?" I asked. Her smile didn't move. "Records are maintained consistent with policy." Pam's hand twitched. She looked at Lori, then at the mediator. "We don't," she said. Voice thin, but crossing the room anyway. "We didn't have photos for that notice." The mediator looked up. "Is that correct?" Lori's laugh came out round and careful. Pam is not recalling the full context. Pam's fingers whitened on the folder. "I am." She swallowed. "And there's something else." She pulled a sheet from her stack and slid it toward the mediator. "Vendor payments. The consulting line item is routed to an LLC owned by your cousin." She didn't look at Lori when she said the last word. A low murmur rose and then flattened under the clock's tick. The mediator adjusted his glasses, then traced a finger down the columns. "This is an HOA account." Pam nodded. "Yes, I signed half of them." Her voice wobbled. The admission steadied it again. "I shouldn't have." Minicliff, the room leaned forward. Even the fluorescence seemed to brighten a notch. I waited until the papers made a full lap back to the table. Then I reached behind the tab that bulged the spine and drew out the extra sleeve. The county seal shimmered under far too bright lights. "There's one more document for the record," I said, letting the silence set the table before the course arrived. "As of last month, I purchased the service alley behind the HOA office at a county tax sale. I laid the deed flat and turned it so the mediator could read my name. Parcel number matches the plat. Title is clear. Access is by permission only." The room paused as if the air itself had to do the math, then released a sound I'll remember longer than any gavel chairs creaked. Someone whispered, "No way." Ruth Ann's purse snapped open and shut like a reflex. Morales covered a grin with his fist. Lori's face emptied by half a shade. "You can't," she began, and stopped because deeds do not respond to tone. The mediator cleared his throat perhaps for courage this time. "Deed appears valid." He looked to Lori. "President Kettering, do you dispute the authenticity?" Her smile tried to reappear and failed. "This is a stunt." "It's a record," I said, keeping my voice level, "like the newsletter you distributed and the email you sent to the entire neighborhood." I touched the edge of the still frame lightly. Unlike those, this one carries a seal. The clock ticked twice. 3 rows back, a phone camera rose and then lowered when the mediator glanced toward it. He set his pen down with deliberation. Given the lack of supporting inspection records, the video evidence contradicting the cited violation, and the financial irregularities that will require separate review, it is the finding of this mediation that the lien is void. He lifted the vendor sheet Pam had provided. It is further ordered that the board submit to an independent audit. Effective immediately, the chair issues a formal censure of President Lori Kettering. The word censure didn't echo, but it landed. Lori's lips pressed into a line that could have been resolve or calculation. "You're overreacting," she said to the room, more than to the mediator. One man's lawn and a family squabble. Ruth Ann stood from the second row, surprising herself as much as anyone. It wasn't just his lawn, she said, and sat before the courage could leak out. Elisa's hand found mine under the table and squeezed once gratitude relief and the caution that keeps relief from spilling into gloating. I nodded without looking at her eyes on the deed. The ink of my name looked new and old at once. The mediator stacked his papers. Meeting adjourned, he said, voice tight with the effort to sound routine. Chairs shuffled. Phones blinked to life. Pam hugged her folder to her chest and exhaled like she'd been underwater. As we stood, Elisa's phone buzzed. She glanced down and angled the screen toward me. "Board notice special session tonight." The subject line carried Lori's efficient punctuation. "She won't let this go quietly," Elise murmured. "No," I said, sliding the deed back where it belonged. "But she'll have to knock before she uses the back door." Outside, the heat rolled off the parking lot in visible waves, but for once it didn't feel like pressure. It felt like light. The smoke from the pits drifted low and sweet as Elise and I walked toward the pavilion. String lights looped from post to post, swaying gently in the evening air. A week ago, I would have braced for silence when we arrived. Tonight, hands lifted in small waves, voices called my name, and the change was so gentle it felt like stepping into a cooler breeze after hours in the heat. Calder Morales called, balancing a foil pan in one hand. He grinned, relief showing in the lines of his cheeks. "We saved you a seat." Neighbors approached in hesitant twos and threes. One couple stopped, words catching in their throats. The husband stared at his shoes before finally muttering, "We were wrong." His wife pressed a paper plate into my hands piled high. "Please, eat." The awkwardness made it believable. Elise smiled politely, guiding me toward a table near the stage. The banner had been straightened. The word harmony no longer drooped. Ruth Ann waved from her chair, her face brighter than I'd ever seen it. Tommy Klein. The interim chair tapped the microphone. "Audit's underway," he said, voice loud over the buzz of conversation. "Thanks to residents, we're opening the books. Invoices, minutes, everything. No more mysteries." Applause rose, halting at first, then steady. Ruth Ann clapped hardest, setting the rhythm. Elise leaned close. "You hear that? They're going to read the minutes aloud." "Small ceremony," I murmured, realizing how much I'd wanted those words to be true. From the gravel path, a slow, familiar gait approached. Grady carried a canvas roll under his arm. He glanced at the pavilion, then at my porch across the street. "You bring your patient?" The wind answered, rattling the broken compass chime that still hung wrong. We slipped home. Under the string lights, the lawn looked almost painted new. Grady unrolled his toolkit on the porch rail: pliers, split rings, fine wire, and a square of cloth. Everything gleamed in the last of the sun. He lifted the chime carefully. "Didn't try to fix it yourself?" "Waiting for the man who measures first," I said. "Good habit," he nodded. Elise brought tea and a towel. Grady used the towel to steady the bent arm, easing it back until it sat true. His hands were slow but sure, pausing as if listening for the metal's consent. He threaded new wire through the loop, stronger than the leather had ever been, then polished the compass face until the north needle caught the light. "Hook," he said. I unscrewed it, and he drove it deeper with one twist. There. No slipping this time. I climbed a stool, rehung the chime. For a moment the air held still. Then a breeze stirred, carrying a clear, confident note. The sound was soft, but it carried across the street. Morales raised both thumbs. Ruth Ann stopped mid-step and smiled, her hands folded over her purse. The tone hung in the air like punctuation. I let myself listen too long. "Greedy for it." "Committee's going to ask you to serve," Grady said, rolling up his tools. "Say yes if you can stand meetings. No, if you can't. Either way, make them measure twice." Back at the pavilion, the atmosphere had shifted. Neighbors brought us food, cornbread, beans, brisket too heavy for flimsy plates. A man who once turned his back approached directly this time. "I saw the video," he said. Voice awkward. "Should have spoken sooner. I'm sorry." His clumsiness made it real. The mic squealed again as Tommy returned. "One more note," he said. "We're forming a transparency panel. Someone to keep us honest, keep the books open. We'd like Mr. Wynn to serve." Every face turned. The expectation wasn't dramatic, it was quiet but steady. Elise's hand closed over mine. "I'll take notes," she whispered, offering to share the weight. Grady stood to the side, his mouth resisting a grin. He gave me one small nod, like marking a stake at the right depth. I cleared my throat. "All right," I said. "I'll serve." The words landed simply. People nodded, some smiling, others just relieved. Music began at last, a familiar tune half sung by everyone. Voices, laughter, the scrape of chairs, all of it arranged itself into a kind of harmony that didn't pretend to be perfect, but felt honest enough. Across the street, the compass chime answered again, a quiet note against the evening. Elise tilted her head. "Listen," she said. We did, and for once it sounded right. I hung the repaired compass chime on the porch beam just after noon, when the lake light turns everything honest. The wire Grady threaded in the place of the leather caught the sun. The needle flashed and settled north as if it had been waiting all year to remember. A small breeze moved across the yard, and the chime offered a clear note that rang once, then twice, like confirmation. Down the block, grills were already snapping open. It was the midsummer cookout again, same tables, same coolers, same lopsided shade, but none of it felt like a test. Elise stepped beside me with a dish towel over her shoulder and smiled at the sound. "Leave it to Texas," she said, to tune the wind for a party. We walked toward the pavilion, passing the strip of asphalt behind the HOA office. A new gate cut the service lane clean from the back lot, fresh hinges shining like nickels. I'd set the sign 2 days ago, leveling it twice because I wanted no argument from physics. Win property access by permission only. The letters weren't large, but they didn't need to be. They were the size of a boundary. Elise squeezed my hand. Subtle, she said, which made me laugh. Nothing about a gate is subtle, but a town learns by what it reads aloud. At the pavilion, string lights sagged in the afternoon heat, waiting for evening to give them purpose. Tommy Klein stood at the mic with a folder of minutes clipped neatly inside. He tapped the stand once, not for attention, but to steady himself. Neighbors, he said, today's minutes reflect 3 changes. He read in his careful handyman cadence the lien rescinded, the audit's preliminary findings, the plan to post invoices, contracts, and approvals for anyone who wanted to look. Transparency isn't a word we print, he added. It's paper on a table. A hum of approval rose from the crowd. Ruth Ann lifted her chin and said, "Amen," which sounded less like church and more like a receipt. Morales filmed a short clip for folks who couldn't make it and panned to me without lingering, as if courtesy had finally learned balance. The music started early, someone's nephew on a borrowed speaker, so Tommy stepped down and people moved toward the food. We took our time. A rule I'd learned this year: if you don't rush to be first, you see who everyone else is when they think no one's watching. I saw apologies passed on paper plates, favors returned with tongs, small debts settled in the language of mustard and sliced onions. On our way back from the tables, we cut past the alley. Lori came the other way alone, carrying a covered tray. She stopped at the gate. Her eyes traced the sign as if words might change if you were careful enough with them. Then she looked at me. No gavel, no newsletter, no microphone. I nodded once. She lowered her eyes, not in defeat exactly, but in recognition. Some doors once measured don't move. Elise and I returned to the pavilion. Tommy handed me the minutes to read the last paragraph aloud. The board accepted the audit timeline. Further actions would be taken in open session. Homeowners could submit questions in writing or speak at the next meeting. My voice sounded odd to me, like trying on a jacket that fit better than expected. When I finished, a teenager rang a little handbell someone had found in the supply closet. It was too cheerful for governance, which made it perfect. The wind came up from the lake, lifting the corner of the banner and the hair on Elise's temple. Across the street, the chime answered. People turned at the sound, not all at once, but as if the note had threaded their names together in the right order. Someone cheered, and then others did, not for me exactly, but for the idea that a sign on a gate and a sentence in the minutes could realign a neighborhood. Ruth Ann reached us with the speed of a determined grandmother. "I brought pecan pie," she announced. "Sugar heals what pride won't." She pressed 2 plates into our hands and patted my elbow as if I'd been up a ladder too long. "You did good," she said. "Now keep it boring." We found a spot near the edge of the grass where the breeze turned and came back over the water. Elise leaned against my shoulder, pie balanced on her knees. The chime rang again, 1 short note, 1 long, like a code I didn't know I remembered. "We bought back our peace," she whispered. "We did," I said, and heard it thrum through the frame of the porch down the length of the beam into the screws we had set with our own hands. The afternoon softened. Kids took turns at the microphone announcing lost flip-flops and a missing spatula in the same tone as public business. Tommy and the committee answered questions without reaching for privacy as a shield. A man I didn't know asked if the alley meant delivery trucks had to call ahead. "That's what permission is," I said. He laughed. "Permission. Imagine that." We stayed until the light thinned enough that the string bulbs mattered. Elise stood and stretched the way you do when your back has carried something a long time and is deciding to forgive you. "Walk," she asked. We strolled to the water and watched a pontoon boat push out from the dock with a slow confidence that made me like it more than speed ever could. The lake held the sky in a way that made both look deeper. On the far shore porch, lights winked into being. At our backs, the compass answered the breeze with a final, satisfied note. I looked across the lake, past the gate, past the pavilion and its small ceremonies, and I felt the thing Grady had promised but never named. Not victory, but alignment. The difference matters. Victory ends. Alignment keeps pointing. This time, I thought, as the needle steadied and the breeze agreed the compass points true. The pavilion still smelled of brisket and sweet corn, and laughter rose where silence used to sit. On my porch, the compass chime, once bent and broken, sang easily in the evening wind, its needle steady north. At the alley gate, the new sign bearing my name wasn't a wall, but a reminder that boundaries can be set without shutting neighbors out. Justice isn't loud. It's steady, and it tastes like barbecue when shared under string lights. If your street's ever tangled in bylaws or petty fines, remember a community can outlast any notice. Where has yours found its voice?